Before this episode starts, 11 people lost their lives in an attack on a Vancouver Filipino street festival on April 27th. My condolences go to those who were injured, lost a loved one, the Filipino community, and the people of Vancouver. May all those who have passed rest in peace. Thank you. Earlier this week, I was sitting with my family, watching as the newly elected Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, delivered his speech to the nation.
Because I am going to begin with the value of humility, and by admitting that I have much to be humble about. That's true. Over my long, that's not an applause line, it's just a statement of fact. Over my long
But one part of his speech stood out to me the most. Take a listen.
Those hinge moments of history. Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality.
Now fully elected, Carney has the task of uniting a divided nation, facing the biggest threat to Canada's nationhood in what might be the whole of Canadian history. Today, I'll talk about the impact of election night, Carney's plans for the country, and who he might work with as he leads a minority government. I'm TWL. You're listening to A Guide with Glasses, a show produced for the Diverse Gazette. First, let's do a quick overview of how the election played out. As of time of writing, the Liberals under Prime Minister Mark Carney have won 169 seats. In second place, the Conservatives won 144 seats, with their leader, Pierre Poilievre, losing his own seat. He has not commented on whether or not he will resign. The Bloc Québécois, which only runs candidates in the province of Quebec, won 22 seats, and their leader, Yazès Franchette Blanchet, won his seat. The Greens won one seat for their co-leader, Elizabeth May. But overall, the NDP were the biggest losers of the night, dropping from 25 seats in 2021 to 7 seats, and their leader, Jagmeet Singh, has resigned after losing his own seat.
Tonight, I've been informed a party leader that I'll be stepping down as party leader as soon as an interim leader can be appointed.
My take on what happened on election night is simple. US President Donald Trump's threats to annex Canada have managed to scare Canadians so much that we rallied around the two parties that we thought could do something about those threats. In the end, it came down to what Canadians wanted: calm and steady, or passionate and fiery. Canadians picked the steady hand.
Stop with the theatrics. We got a job to do.
This means that Carney will have a bunch of options when building his next government. For both former Prime Ministers, Justin Trudeau and Stephen Harper, had formed agreements with the opposition parties to not bring down their governments while not forming coalitions. This, in theory, would be the easy way for Mark Carney to run the government. Carney could stack the government with Liberals while picking and choosing parties to negotiate with on a case-by-case basis.
Fine. We'll get lollipops, candy corn, and Oreos. You happy now?
This may not be his only option. As Canadians have found, we live in interesting times. But first, you need to know what Carney's plan for government is. Thankfully, the CBC has made a website with all of the federal party's plans, so I will be talking about what I think you may want to know, and I'll link the full page in the description. For a lot of Canadians, this election was about one day being able to buy a home, afford food, and live their life. But many Canadians feel like they have been left behind in an age of growing wealth. A 2024 study found that 2 Canadian cities are the most expensive in the world. Demographia found that Toronto and Vancouver were the 11th and 3rd most expensive housing markets in the world, respectively. With millions of Canadians living and working in these cities, it's no surprise that housing, among other things, is such a big issue. Carney's biggest housing promise is the Build Canada Homes Agency, which would, and I quote from the CBC, act as a developer overseeing the construction of affordable housing in Canada. This would include $25 billion for aid to current Canadian home builders and a combined $140 million in northern infrastructure, development, and home repair for Nunavut, Indigenous peoples, and underserved groups.
We got other things to cover, buddy. Hurry up!
Listen, dude, I understand, but we have to talk about taxes. Carney has promised to cut 1% off the lowest earners' income tax. He also promised to slash the increase in capital gains taxes, which are taxes collected when you sell your investments in things like stocks or government bonds. His plans also includes tax cuts for homes valued under $1 million for first-time homebuyers. On infrastructure, the Liberals want to create a first-mile fund for transportation to and from natural resource extraction sites, which may include things like minerals and oil.
And that's why Mark Carney got my vote. I love drinking crude oil. Be advised, do not drink crude oil.
The plan includes fast-tracking approval for infrastructure projects for the country, a new Indigenous-owned liquid natural gas processing site, and $170 million in investment for the Hudson's Bay Railway and the Port of Churchill in Manitoba. All things the Liberals will help in getting goods in, out, and around the country.
Boy, I love trains!
On national defense, the government will look towards meeting NATO's 2% of GDP's defense spending target. It's the North Atlantic Defense Pact between Europe, Canada, and the United States. However, Carney wants to review contracts to buy F-35s from the United States. I wonder why.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like. And it would also be much better for national security.
Other things include boosting investment in defending Canada's Arctic border and streamlining procurement for the Canadian Armed Forces. The future government also promised to add 1,000 new border officers, as well as drones, scanners, and canines, as well as targeting suspicious shipments that enter Canada. And finally, on U.S.-Canada relations, Carney's government would create multiple investment funds for creating new industries and helping hold old industries hurt by tariffs, while also promising to boost food security through, you guessed it, investment in greenhouses, fishing, and farmers.
Alright, let's wrap this up so I can go watch J.J. McCullough.
So, if Carney wants to make sure his party always has a majority, he'd need to form a coalition government. What are his options? He could work with the New Democratic Party, but unlike Trudeau, Carney seems to be closer to the Conservatives than the NDP.
But the Liberals are bigger than the NDP. Shouldn't they be afraid of Carney?
Sure, but the Liberals would have a lot more to lose if another election happened right now. And while voters may blame other parties if they brought down the government, it would be a bad look for Mark Carney, who's billed himself as a statesman with a steady hand. Meaning, any negotiations with the NDP would probably require some major concessions that would water down a lot of the platform that the Liberals ran on. So it would be unlikely the two would work together. Especially since the NDP don't have a leader right now. So any deal would either have to wait until a new one is elected, or have to be negotiated by the interim leader who may have wildly different opinions than the newly elected leader. And while both the Conservatives and the Liberals may work together on a case-by-case basis, it is even more unlikely that the two would form a government together. It would be a major break in Canadian political convention. But hey, I'm happy to be wrong. Another problem with a magical liberal conservative government is that we don't know what Pierre Poilievre plans to do right now. He could step down, which would run the same problem as the NDP, or he could stay party leader and direct the party from the outside. And there is even some speculation that he'll ask someone from his party to give him their seat. We really don't know what his next move is. That leaves the Bloc. Their leader, Blanchet, has already stated he'd be willing to work with Carney as long as he takes on Trump. This would be the most unpredictable alliance. The Bloc, under Blanchet, normally fights for greater autonomy or even independence from Canada for Quebec, but the Bloc also has lost seats to the Liberals. And, unlike the NDP, Blanchet is in a safer position, where his future as leader may depend on how he interacts with the new Liberal government. So it's hard to say how hard they would push on some of their more extreme policies. Overall, it's hard to say what Carney does from here. And I'm too tired to guess.
I don't care.
Honestly, I'm thankful this election season is over. 6 weeks of craziness, threats to Canada's sovereignty, and the end of the Justin Trudeau era have been a lot to keep up with. I could leave you with some long-winded point of how politics can change on a dime, or how this election slipped through Pierre Poilievre's grasp, but it just doesn't seem genuine. Instead, I'd like for you to listen to what I found was the most powerful moment in Poilievre's speech at the end of Monday night. Take a listen.
We congratulate people from all political backgrounds on participating in the democratic process. And as I said, while we will do our constitutional duty of holding government to account and proposing better alternatives, we will always put Canada first as we stare down tariffs and other irresponsible threats from President Trump. Conservatives will work with the Prime Minister and all parties with the common goal of defending Canada's interests and getting a new trade deal that puts these tariffs behind us while protecting our sovereignty and the Canadian people.
Hey folks, I just wanted to talk a bit about everything this week, but I avoided talking about the campaign. It was crazy, but I just don't feel like I can add anything that hasn't already been said. The full breakdown of all the platforms by the CBC is in the description, as well as a link to yesterday's newsletter, where we're talking about what this new government means for the arts spending, how the Pope's death is helping Ukraine, and the Revenge of the Sith rerun in theaters. Alan Gonzalez also compiled a list of all world leaders who showed their support for the Filipino community after the Vancouver Street Festival attack. This episode of A Guy with Glasses was produced entirely by me, TWL, for the Diverse Gazette. Next week, I'll be talking about water, the effect it's having on US-Mexico relations, and what that means for Canada. But I'll see ya when I see ya. Goodbye now.